What is the difference between per person benefits and when you have M+1 or M+4?
When you look at that, is generally how the pricing is done. So when you're told that the pricing per person, they charge each and every single member each life X rate. So if you charge per family, the rate should be much lower than how it is priced per person.
Welcome to another episode of the Zamara podcast. I'm your host, Faiza Khan. I'm a senior medical advisor, part of the retail team. And today I am joined by two of my colleagues, Joseph Ndege, a senior risk consultant in medical broking, and Paul Oyimbo, who is also a senior risk consultant in medical broking. We're diving deep into the topics of healthcare with a special focus on medical benefits. So, Joseph, maybe we can start by discussing about copay, and you can explain to us what is copay in insurance, how does copay work, and if I was to take a copay, how would that benefit me as a client?
Thank you very much, Pfizer. That is one of the most sought after question in the medical insurance, especially for members who have medical covers that have the copay aspect embedded as part of coverage. So copayment simply means that you're taking up part of coverage like cost sharing with the insurance company. So we find that if your bill is, say for example, 10,000 and the predetermined co-payment amount is 1,000, it means that part of the bill, in this case 1,000 shillings, will have to be taken care of by yourself as part of the hospital undertaking by the insurance company. So one of the benefits of a co-payment is that it reduces the cost of insurance premium. So you find that if there's a co-payment aspect, people tend to shy away from going to the hospital for minor ailments. So you'll only go to the hospital when there is an urgent need, which is actually critical and requires you to visit the hospital as an emergency or as something that really requires management. Yeah.
Also, just to add that the advantage for the organization is at the tail end of the policy while you're calculating the loss ratio. So basically, how much has been claimed by the members vis-a-vis what was paid for. So it also helps the organization in saving on the next policy period, the kind of premium that you're going to be paying at renewal.
Okay, so you'd advise copay would be something companies should consider.
Yes.
So the next question is about pre-authorization. I know there can be scheduled admissions or emergency admissions. What is the advantage of, if I have a scheduled admission, what is the advantage of me seeking pre-authorization before I go to the hospital? And when it's an emergency hospitalization, how does that work?
So I'll start with the inpatient visit. So when you have a scheduled procedure, for instance, and you'll need to request for it prior to the date so that you can save on the time that you're going to spend while you're going through the process of admission. So at the same time, it also helps the insurance company to make sure that the providers are really not spending too much of your benefits. And it's also going to help you exactly to sort out the actual issue that you're going in for. So that also it helps on the cost management, also cost, yeah.
Maybe to just add on to what Paul has said, an advantage of seeking a pre-authorization, in a way, it is a control mechanism because without pre-authorization, it means that you open a leeway where a provider can just offer a service end to end without seeking any pre-approvals from the insurance company. In the end, they might end up offering services which are either non-payables, not covered, and when they submit that invoice for the payment to the insurance company, they might end up declining it. And guess what? When that declinature is communicated to the hospital will call you, the patient, even if it's 3 months down the line, asking you to pay that bill out of pocket. Okay? So, in a way, it also safeguards your benefits from exploitation. As you all know, if you open up access to medical bills with your medical insurance without putting any mechanisms to manage how it is utilized, it can be opened up to abuse or sometimes mismanagement and exploitation.
And in terms of if I have an emergency admission, how would that work?
That's interesting. So there is an unwritten agreement between hospitals and insurance companies. So for emergency cases, it is advisable that you are admitted first, you're given treatment first, and within 24 hours, the hospital can communicate with the insurance company to report your admission. But usually, the best way to approach such scenarios is to make a call to the insurance company, because all insurance companies that actually offer medical insurance have a dedicated 24-hour call center.
Yeah.
So for emergency cases, pre-authorizing the admission can be done via a phone call, which can be approved instantaneously.
Okay, so one of the other questions that I hear a lot of clients asking is about bed limits. And I know with insurances, you can take different limits, 5 million, 10 million, depending. So if I have a limit of 5 million, for example, what kind of bed limit am I entitled to? And how do you communicate to clients? Because a lot of the times I see when a client goes to hospital, they want a standard private room. And it could be that I'm not entitled to that. So how do you handle such?
Well, for that, we normally engage our clients and ask them what they would like, because there are different options. So depending on how much that you want to spend, then you maybe when you look at a standard private room, for instance, Nairobi Hospital, it goes for maybe like 32,000.
Yes.
So it depends on what you want, a general ward bed, standard private room, then we can negotiate for that. And it's usually it's normally a sub-limit of the overall inpatient. So yet again, the private insurance companies do not pay the full amount,
Yeah.
because they pay net of shift. So there's a portion that is paid by shift, then the balance is settled by the private insurance companies.
So, Paul, if I want to go to North Wing, what would happen then? Because
Right.
you've seen the North Wing rooms, right? They're like
Or
it's like a hotel.
residential.
Yeah, it's amazing. So if I want to go to North Wing, how does that work?
That definitely is going to impact you as the end user, because if you negotiate for instance 40,000 and nothing is 60, 65, 70,
65, yeah.
55.
Yeah.
So that would mean that you'll have to settle the difference out of pocket.
Oh, so I have that
as you-
option.
Yes,
Okay.
you have that option, but now it has to impact you as the end user.
For the bed limits, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
It depends on your preference as the client. We might have one client with inpatient 5 million and a bed limit of 20,000. We might also have client B with inpatient same amount 5 million, but their bed limit is 60,000. So it is possible to negotiate on either scenario, but in the long run, it has an impact on the premium payable, the cost of inpatient rate.
Yeah.
So if you choose to go with a higher bed limit, because at the end of the day, it is going to impact the cost of inpatient treatment per hospitalization.
Yeah.
Remember, if you have the bed limit at 20,000 per day or 60,000 per day, it means that every day for bed only, you're going to be charged 60,000 in addition to the hospital charges, theater charges, nursing fee. So that risk has to be accounted for by the underwriter whenever they're pricing for those bed limits. So the higher the bed limits,
Yeah.
it is most definitely going to impact the cost of inpatient cost and the overall premium as at large.
You mentioned that it's net of shift. So if it's a client who's not registered for shift, what happens to the amount?
Well, they'll have to pay out of pocket
Okay.
right now, because as we know, it is a mandatory requirement by the government for every citizen who's 18 years and above
Yeah.
to be registered under Shift SHA. So if someone has not enrolled, it means that they have not done that voluntarily. And under private insurance, especially medical insurance, there's a clause that says that any bills that are recoverable under any other insurance
Yes.
are not payable for that policy.
Yeah.
So SHA is one of them, previously NHIF.
Yeah.
There's also in some cases GPA WIBA, which might also impact coverage of a certain sublimit.
Okay, so Joseph, that's interesting what you've just mentioned. So let me ask you, I work for Zamara, so I'm insured by Zamara, and my husband works for a different company, but we have two covers. So Zamara is different, and his company gives us a different cover. How does that work?
Well, that's where coinsurance comes in, especially when at the point of admission, I'm assuming at this point you are admitted.
Yeah.
And you are admitted under cover A, let's say yours.
Yeah.
And at the point of admission, you declare to the hospital that I'd like to use both covers. Okay, so if they go ahead to submit your admission with insurance A, at the point of discharge, they'll also share the same bills with insurance B.
Right.
But remember, the hospital discharge bill indicates the insurer there. So they will also have to submit the same invoice to insurance B, but bearing the name of insurance A.
A,
At that
right.
point, insurance B will ask the hospital how much has insurance A paid. If they have paid to the maximum limit available, maybe the cost of hospitalization is 2 million, but insurance A is only paying up to 1 million shillings, then the next insurance company will take up a remainder of that bill. But at no point, because double insurance means that the cost of insurance will have to be co-shared.
Co-shared, okay.
Thanks, Joseph. Just to add on to that, it's also important to note that it's advisable to pick the insurance that has the higher bed limit, because that is the only benefit that cannot be shared by the two insurances. So if A has a higher limit, you'd sign up with A, then add the B, because at the point of payment, there's only one that can settle. So you cannot take a small portion to be paid for bed from insurer A, then B also settles that. So that is the only catch on that.
I think that's a very important aspect that Paul has brought up.
Yeah.
Because you'll find that, for example, I have one insurance company that pays my bed up to 25,000. Then insurance B pays up to 30,000. And in the back of my mind, I say, combine the two beds, it gives me the north wing.
Yeah.
It's not possible. So the bed allocation is the amount, like Paul has mentioned, that cannot be topped up against each individual insurance coverage.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, what is the difference between per person benefits and when you have M+1 or M+4? What is the difference between the two benefits? How does that work?
So when you look at that, is generally how the pricing is done. So when you're told that the pricing per person, they charge each and every single member, each life,
Yeah.
X rate. So if you charge per family, the rate should be much lower than how it is priced per person. So for instance, when you're charging maybe 2 million for a family, the kind of premium that they're going to pay for that as compared to the same 2 million per person for another family, the difference will be that the per person rates will be way higher than the per family. So that is how you can tell the difference between the per person and the just on the rates that are being.
Another aspect that you can look at it from is that per person benefit means that if the family is given, say, for example, outpatient 100,000 per person, it means that if I'm covered myself, my spouse, and two children, it means that each of them has 100,000 allocated to them.
Individually, okay.
The benefit for one individual does not affect the next person within the same family. As opposed to a shared benefit, if it is 100,000 Kenya shillings per family, it means that if the principal member, the employee, or a dependent uses 100,000, the remaining members of the family will not have coverage completely.
Okay.
So we can also look at it from that angle.
Per person benefits actually is better than taking per family.
Absolutely. It's superior but more expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Way more expensive.
Yeah. But I guess, Joseph, that's when you look at, how much you spend in a year in terms of outpatient, if it's worth for you to take that. Otherwise, to be honest, when you look at outpatient costs, how many times do you go to hospital? Unless you have a young family, then that's different.
Actually, that conversation should be guided with if at all you have a family member who has maybe a chronic ailment.
Yes, yeah.
So it will go a long way to also save, to help the other people also have some coverage also throughout the whole year.
Yeah.
So if you do per person, then it does not really affect when that particular member keeps claiming.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect the other family members. So it goes a long way to also help the rest.
But either way, if you can afford it, take it, because you never know. Insurance is aimed at taking care of unforeseen. I might not be visiting the hospital frequently, or maybe for the entire financial year, I've never tapped into my outpatient. But you never know. One occurrence can easily wipe out the entire allocation. So it is better to be prepared than sorry. Yeah. Healthcare is extremely expensive, and if you have an option of taking up insurance coverage, then take
It's
it.
advisable.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed. One of the other things is about dependents. So if I have 4 dependents and I have one who's 10, maybe 15, and 26, what are the age limits to add dependents on cover?
It's usually pretty open. It's really looked at from 0 to 18. For those particular age brackets, you're allowed to add them without any complications, any proof of schooling. So how the underwriting is usually done is they normally look at any dependent between the ages of 18 and 25. You'll need proof of schooling in order for them to be added because they're termed as adults. So an adult is supposed to have their own cover as a principal member. So any dependent below the age of 18 is pretty straightforward. You just share their names and they're usually added onto the cover. But anyone above 18 and 25, you need to be going to school or school going so that you can share their ID, the identification for school. Then they can be added as your dependent. Otherwise, they're supposed to be added onto the cover as a principal member.
Absolutely. Maybe just to add on to what Paul has said, he's mentioned from 0 to 18, 0 years. But according to WHO standards, they say that a term baby is anywhere between 38 to 42 weeks. So that is considered a term baby. So coverage starts immediately. A baby becomes a term baby. So that's age 0 at 38, say 38 to 42 weeks. And the coverage continues, as Paul has mentioned, up to 18 years. So 18 years, there is a common understanding within the insurance industry to have that coverage extended up to age 22 in some cases or 25 in some cases. Insurance companies treat it differently, but at least they allow coverage beyond 18 years
Yeah.
as long as there is proof of schooling. It's important to note that with SHA,
Yeah.
the coverage is actually capped at 18. The moment someone hits 18, they're supposed to be considered their own household. So when they register under SHA,
Yeah.
they register as their own household.
The other thing is, I'm sure you have a lot you hear about people asking about maternity. Maternity has a sublimit, of course, and it's an add on benefit, I believe. How does maternity, if I want to enhance my benefit, is there a possibility to do that? And what are the limitations in terms of, are there any exclusions that say that would be linked to maternity? Anything that would not be covered?
Right. For maternity, you can enhance the overall inpatient, but you can't really just enhance a maternity benefit as a standalone.
Okay.
So that is a discussion that maybe at the point of placing the cover, then you just decide on how much that you'd want that maternity to be. So it can either be as a sublimit, which would be, it will be part of the overall inpatient, or maternity as a standalone. But you can't go and sign up for maternity for X amount, then give people options of maybe enhancing, maybe getting something higher than that.
Oh, okay.
So it usually does not, underwriters usually do not allow for any enhancements of the maternity benefit after the cover has been placed. So as pertaining the things that are covered is the delivery and everything else pertaining the delivery itself, but things like sanitary towels, maybe soap, a basin, maybe sandals.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are normally excluded. So members usually assume that when you walk into the hospital to deliver, then you're entitled to all these other things that come along with it.
Yeah.
So those are the things that are normally not considered or paid for by the underwriter at the end of the day.
And Paul, in terms of the maternity cover, does that also cover when the baby is born? Is there a benefit for that, or is that a separate benefit?
Yes, that is also included. So the bill is normally split between the mother and the baby. So at the same time, when you have like maybe a premature baby, there's usually a prematurity benefit that also caters for the baby. So the baby is also covered within the maternity.
I'd like to approach it from a different angle, maybe just to add on to some of the non-payables. In some cases, we may have members who request for epidural assisted delivery.
Yes.
So those ones are currently not covered under the insurance. I do not want to delve deep into it, but they are among the exclusions. Another aspect of maternity coverage would affect dependents who are neither principal members. By principal member, in this case, I'm talking about a company that has an employee as the principal member, and then there's a spouse. And remember, there's a leeway of covering dependents up to age 25 as long as they are in school and there's
Education,
proof of
yeah.
schooling. And age 18 to 25 are basically adults. And they can also be tempted, or they might need the services that are geared towards tapping the maternity benefit.
Yeah.
So if that were to be the case, then the coverage would not extend to dependents who are not spouses to the principal member.
The other question is in terms of vaccinations. Does insurance company, do they cover travel vaccines? Do they cover, like if I need a flu shot, would you cover preventative vaccines?
Generally, insurance companies cover all kinds of vaccines.
Okay.
However, these vaccines are supposed to be negotiated for. The ones that are pretty straightforward that all underwriters cover are the KP and the baby-friendly vaccines.
Right.
So the KP are the government regimes, the vaccines that are recommended by the government that all our dependents are supposed to take.
Yeah.
So things like menococcal, it's called?
Menococcal
Yes,
meningitis.
menococcal, meningitis, polio. Such
Yeah.
kind of vaccines are usually recommended by the government that
Yes.
our dependents should or
Should.
must take.
Yeah.
So the other vaccines that are also covered are the private vaccines, the likes of flu, the travel vaccines as well, like yellow fever.
Yeah.
So these are things that can also be negotiated as an add-on onto the KP and the baby-friendly vaccines that are usually part of the vaccines that are covered.
All vaccines can be covered by the insurance company, but extending coverage to include the private vaccines would come at a cost. The ones that are offered as standard, this is for a standard benefit, are the regimens that Paul has mentioned, either KP
KP,
or a
yeah.
baby-friendly version
Yeah.
of the same vaccine. KPs are offered by the government for free,
Yeah.
and a baby-friendly version of KP is the one that is, like the word suggests, referred to as
Yeah.
baby-friendly vaccines. So any other vaccine regimen that is outside that scope is considered an optional private vaccine. And these can only be covered if negotiated on inception and purchased. Okay, otherwise they would be considered as standard exclusion under an insurance policy.
Okay, so the next one is group excess of loss. Maybe you can just elaborate and explain what group excess of loss is.
So group excess of loss is an extra benefit that is negotiated by employers to help employees who max out their overall inpatient limits. So it works in two ways. The general way that it normally works is the group excess of loss is supposed to be catering for acute ailments and accidents only. So acute ailments could be something like food poisoning, and then also you can look at maybe the more severe ones like heart attack, stroke. So those are the acute ailments that are normally factored in, and then accidents. So if you have any of those, then you max out your overall inpatient, then you can tap into this particular benefit. However, you can also go ahead and negotiate for extras. So when I say extras, I mean things that already have a sublimit, like for instance, chronic disease. So you can also add that to the group excess of loss. However, the only benefit that cannot be accommodated under group excess of loss is maternity-related ailments.
I was just going to ask.
So that
Yeah.
cannot be accommodated under GXOL.
Okay.
So anything else that has a sublimit can be negotiated and be accommodated under that particular benefit.
I don't think many people know about that because, like, for me, I'm just learning about it.
And it comes at an additional cost.
Is it very high?
Not really, considering what you're getting,
Yeah.
depending on what you need,
Right.
it's something that is worth considering.
Okay. That's good.
But to note, it's normally charged per person,
Oh, so it's not like a group rate.
not a group rate. It's a group benefit, yes,
Yes.
but it's charged
Per
per
person.
person. Yes, charged
Wow.
per life.
So moving on, I wanted to ask about aftercare. So if I've been admitted into hospital and once I've been discharged, do insurance companies cover any follow-up treatment that I may require? So for example, if I had a surgery and I need to go back for a follow-up, either for a scan or remove my stitches, for example, would that be covered?
Absolutely. So that under insurance coverage would fall under a benefit called post-hospitalization. Now, again, depending on need,
Yeah.
because some aftercare or follow-up treatment might require hospitalization.
Yeah.
All right. So a good example in this case would be I've had a fracture, I've had an implant, say on my knee, and then after 6 months, I'm supposed to come back to the hospital to have that implant removed. So that is a follow-up treatment or aftercare, but under inpatient. So that's going to be taken
Right.
care of as an inpatient treatment follow-up. But if it's a normal follow-up that is supposed to be reviewed under outpatient, meaning that you are not going to be admitted, it would follow. It would fall under a benefit called post-hospitalization, which is an inpatient benefit, but taking care of outpatient visits. Now, this is a benefit that is embedded within your inpatient, but the only disadvantage that you may have when tapping this benefit is that you will need to pay out of pocket and claim for
Right.
reimbursement. Otherwise, you can still access the follow-up treatment as a normal outpatient visit, and this cost is going to be taken care of from your outpatient overall benefits.
Okay.
So there are various scenarios where you can look at it depending on need, but I would encourage those who are going back for follow-up treatment, especially within 30 days,
Yeah.
to look into tapping the post-hospitalization benefit, which is
Okay.
within inpatient.
And just for a clarification, the post-hospitalization benefit, is it limited? So, for example, like you mentioned, if I've had a fracture and I require physiotherapy as outpatient, is it limited in any way, or that would be covered?
It has a limitation in terms of cash allocation or amount allocated under
Okay.
that benefit.
Yeah.
A normal physiotherapy, maybe per session, would cost anywhere 3,000 to 4,500 per session,
Yeah.
and maybe you require 10 sessions.
Yeah.
So if you do a quick math, and maybe the post-hospitalization limit is 30,000. So after the 30,000 is maxed,
Yeah.
you will revert to your normal outpatient benefit, or
Right.
if
Okay.
exhausted, you may need to pay out of pocket. So that is the limitation that may be considered when you're looking to tap
Alright.
into this benefit.
Thanks, Joseph. Just to add on to that as well, when you're looking at aftercare, you can also be looking at anyone who was admitted and maybe needs home care nursing.
Yeah.
So there's an aspect of home care nursing that also is accommodated within the inpatient. However, it has to be tapped from the reason why you're actually admitted in that particular for that particular case. So, for instance, if it is something to do with your chronic, it has to be paid off your chronic limit. So it has that limitation. So when you're going for when you're doing home nursing, it is subject to pre-authorization and subject to the condition sublimit.
Wow. So if I've exhausted my chronic, that means then there's no cover.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Another thing, it has to be recommended by the discharging doctor or your
Yeah.
attending doctor that you really need the home care or
Yeah.
home-based
Yeah.
care.
I'm sure you come across a lot of this. If I have a skin condition and the doctor recommends that I need a certain soap that I need to use or a certain lotion, or for example, I have an itch in my scalp that requires a certain shampoo that I can use, does insurance cover that?
That's a very interesting question. And when you look at the standard policy terms traditionally,
Yes.
any lotion or soaps would automatically be excluded in terms of coverage under the medical insurance.
Yeah.
But hey, we're living in changing times. There are various options available out there. Insurance companies are no longer rigid in terms of coverage. So from time to time, you'll find coverage extended to cater for medicated soaps and creams.
Right.
As long as these are medicated,
Yeah.
they're going to be covered. But again, this is something that has to be negotiated at the time of inception. They will not appear as standard coverage for the medical insurance. So if you know that you're going to need this depending on your demographies, whether an individual or an organization, you can have these terms slotted in at the time of negotiation so that they can be included as part of coverage. And yes, they can be covered if negotiated, and in some cases, they might impact also the premiums payable.
Now, the other question is about supplements. I know that a lot of insurance companies don't cover supplements, but let me ask you, of course, because of age, we have to start taking, maybe osteocare because of bones or vitamins and all. it's more like preventing to become sick. So how does that work? Like, would insurance companies consider that? Because I know that's always an issue with clients as well. They're always asking about supplements. So yeah, if you could please elaborate on that.
So generally, insurance is normally curative rather than preventive. So the underwriters would pay claims for something that is going to cure you, not really prevent. So as much as you'd want to get supplements because maybe you lack them for one reason or another, maybe age or things like that. So how it's normally looked at is if it is going to treat a diagnosed condition, then it will be paid for. However, this also needs to be negotiated for prior to onset of the cover. So you need to come out clearly and say that you need supplements and maybe negotiate for a certain amount. Then, if it is something that you are diagnosed with something that needs supplements, then that will be covered. Otherwise, it will be excluded.
So sorry, Paul, just to ask, in terms of maternity, are supplements covered for maternity?
Yes, depending again if it has been negotiated for. There's some like
Right. Okay.
folic acid,
Yeah.
Pregnacare
Yeah.
Plus. If they're negotiated for, then they will be
They'll be covered.
accommodated as well.
So the next question is interesting. I'm sure you have enough people asking about this. Family planning. Is that an added benefit or is that included in the insurance?
Yes, indeed, that has come up more than once. And in some cases, we've seen questions like, what is the scope of family planning? Does it include both male and female? Does it cater for inpatient family planning? Is condom also covered as part of? Because yes, condoms it's a family planning method. Is it covered under insurance within the scope of family planning? So family planning again does not come as standard coverage. It has to be negotiated and it impacts the premium payable. So in terms of scope of coverage, most insurance companies would say that, or rather as part of the policy terms, they will state that it caters for long-term family planning methods within outpatient. Very rare cases where you'll find that benefit extending to inpatient, all right? But it is possible as long as it is negotiated and priced separately. But the most common included benefit for family planning is limited to outpatient.
One last question for the gentleman. Overseas treatment. So if I've been recommended treatment that is not available locally and I decide to go overseas, what are my limitations in terms of insurance?
Right. So for overseas referrals, it depends on how much you have under your inpatient cover. So as much as it is accommodated within the policy, before you are sent out there, the underwriter will check, do you still have a limit or a balance remaining within your overall inpatient? Because for everything to do with flights and accommodation, it's going to be catered for from your inpatient. So if you do not have subsequent or enough remaining in your cover, then you will not be allowed to go. So they have to check that first. Then they'll also have to look for the hospitals or the providers that they've partnered with abroad, wherever you're going. And most of the time, it's normally India and the likes. So there are certain countries that really they do not encourage or allow people to go to, like the US or Europe, because of the Medicare there is very expensive. So they've partnered with other providers in other countries, like India, like I mentioned. So that is how it works. And you also have to get clearance from the Ministry of Health before you actually leave the country, because they have to check, is it something that you can get in country and so on and so forth. So they have to do all those checks and make sure that wherever you're going, you already have a hospital that you're going to on the other side, and they have your details and everything else, so that you just don't go there and get stuck.
So if I decide, let's say treatment is available locally, but I still decide I want to go to India. I do not want the insurance to pay for my airfare and accommodation because, of course, I know that wouldn't be covered. But would they cover for my treatment?
It needs pre-authorization. So
Yeah.
if you just go without letting the underwriter know,
Yeah.
then it will not be covered.
Okay.
Because they need to know that you're going out there for this, and for that there is the other documentation that is required in order for them to authorize or to agree or
Right.
to let you go. So if you just go without their
Authorization.
knowledge, then
Yeah.
it will not be covered.
Okay.
Yes.
And also, it needs to be referred, right? has to be
okay.
recommended by the local attending doctor,
Yeah.
meaning that they'll write your medical report recommending that they're referring you to a hospital, say in India,
Yeah.
for further management of a diagnosed condition.
Okay.
And the cost also has to be comparable. And again, in terms of limitation, maybe because the local insurance is underwritten here in Kenya, means
Yeah.
that the cost implication is actually limited to cost of treatment here locally. So one of
Yeah.
the countries where cost of treatment is comparable to Kenya is India. So
Yes.
that's why most insurance companies will actually pay for your treatment in
Yeah.
India as long as the cost of treatment is comparable in cost. And in some cases, they will even insist that uh, that treatment must not be available locally,
Yeah.
hence prompting the recommendation for you to be taken
Travel
out
outside. Okay.
of the country. So it means
Yeah.
that I cannot wake up one day and just say I want to go to India for a procedure that can be done at
Locally.
a local
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
So for that, the insurance company will tell you that there is no need, there's no recommendation, and even the Minister of Health
Yeah.
might not even clear you
To travel.
to travel for that treatment outside the country.
Interesting. Okay. So thank you, gentlemen. We've come to the end of our episode. Any closing remarks?
Thanks, Faiza, Joseph, for the conversation. Let's keep it going. Very happy to have interacted with my colleagues and to our audience. Let's make sure that we watch what we eat, when we eat, and we take care of our bodies because our health is very important to us. Anytime that you need any medical assistance, please reach out to Zamara.
There are so many options for medical insurance out there. But before you go for any particular option, assess your needs. Make sure that what you're purchasing is actually what you need, because it is important to go through the fine print to make sure that your cover scope is within what you and your family need. We offer advice in terms of which options are out there after assessing your needs and helping you choose the best option out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul and Joseph, for the insightful session. I've learned a lot. And thank you to our viewers and audience for joining. Please look out for the next podcast and feel free to reach out to Zamara through our social media platforms, WhatsApp, or email.